everybody. I want to make a video called Feminists Are Right, Women Have It Worse, about the only point or the position in which I feel that women have it worse. I want to explore that a little bit. So, these are just my thoughts, of course. I'm a woman against feminism and I'm exploring my thoughts. I know that many people wouldn't agree with it, but these are my thoughts. Okay, so I think that the major difference between men and women is simply that I think we can, men and women are different. We can argue about that. Some people say, oh, women are more emotional, men or whatever, whatever. And we can argue about all these things. Maybe these things are true, maybe they're not. Everybody can have a different opinion and da da da. But what we can't argue about is that the original difference between men and women historically and throughout most of human history and time and everything has been that women got pregnant while men didn't. After sex happened, women had the potential to get pregnant while men didn't have the potential to get pregnant. And this is something that comes from nature. It's a very natural definition of the difference between female and male. And I think that this is something that is very important when exploring the difference between men and women. Because I think this is like the fundamental building block. This is the difference between men and women. It is that after sex, women face the potential to be pregnant, have a child, have to take care of that child, have to breastfeed that child, have to carry that child around for a long time, and so on. And men have sex and then they walk away from that, right? So I think if you look at things in nature, if every human is to ask themselves what would they rather be in nature without societal rules, without the society that we live in, just imagine yourself out there in the wild, in the bush, in nature, and you have to choose whether or not you would be a man or woman. I believe that every man and every woman would logically choose to be a man. Okay? So what I'm saying is that if you didn't have a society to depend on, if you didn't have all the societal rules that we live in, if you didn't have a community, and if you were to think of yourself as stranded out in the middle of nowhere in the bush or whatever, would you decide to be a woman or a man? Personally, I would of course choose to be a man, and I think that most women would also choose to be a man, and I think that most men would also choose to be a man, simply because in this sort of natural world, whatever, if you are alone in the bush or whatever, when the sexes come together, the difference is that a man can walk away without the fear of being pregnant, while a woman, after sex, she has the fear of being pregnant, and so on and so on. She also has to deal with a period. She has to deal with literally all of the reproductive consequences of sex, while men do not deal with these reproductive consequences, right? So this is the point on which I believe that women have it worse than men. And then this brings me to the other parts of my thoughts, which I don't know if this would make the title clickbaity, but then we come to the concept of gynocentrism, which is something that MRAs, men's rights activists, talk about. I'm not like the most learned person, so I don't know everything, but I know that gynocentrism talks about the natural bias that humans, both men and women, probably have towards women, meaning that we are easier on women, we are more likely to see women as victims, we are more likely to help women, and so on. And I think that gynocentrism, if it exists, and I personally am inclined to believe that it does exist, is the counter to the fact that women in nature have it much worse than men. Women have it much worse than men because we face the reproductive consequences of sex. And society and humans over a long period of time psychologically have adapted to that by making by being easier on women, by being more likely to help women, and so on and so on. And then society created rules and so on that benefited women by helping them to carry this reproductive cost or whatever, to carry this burden of children. And so I think throughout all of history and stuff like that, all of the rules that we have concerning men and women and, like traditional marriage and now child support and all of these rules are put in place simply to help women carry that burden that women initially had and that made their lives, of course, worse. So naturally, yes, I agree with feminist women do have the shorter end of the stick. We've had it worse, we've had it worse. But society has compensated for that with things like in the past, like marriage and so on, and like traditional society. And now we have a situation where we say, okay, child support, it doesn't matter as long as the guy was involved, he has to also bear this consequence. And this is a form of like justice, equality, whatever, correcting for nature's imbalance in giving all the reproductive uh, responsibility to women. So society has taken that reproductive responsibility away from women and has given men supposedly half of that, well, wanted to give men half of the reproductive responsibility. And how we decided to split that reproductive responsibility in the past was through making men provide and protect society. Protect, provide. They went to war, they provided, they took on the role of being the bigger provider because the woman was busy with the other very real reproductive responsibilities, such as being close to the child, breastfeeding, blah, 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 blah. And then of course, with time, things changed, and now we have a situation where the birth rates are very low. Women are not having children as they were before. So, of course, we have birth control. That pretty much changed everything, right? So now we have birth control. We have lower birth rates. Women are not as afraid of getting pregnant. We're not getting pregnant just like that or whatever. So the reproductive responsibility on women has decreased dramatically. And therefore, society sort of wants to adapt to that by reducing the reproductive responsibility on men as well. But of course, once it drops on women, it also automatically drops on men because there are less children. So having less children for a woman means having less children for a man. So he has to provide less. He has to protect less people. So the all of this has been reduced, and so this is like the adaptation. But that's not the point of the video. The point really was just to explain this very short point that I hope I made well, that yes, I can agree with feminists that in nature, women have had it worse or have it worse. We have the shorter end of the stick if you're talking about from nature or from, without society, what is. But please consider that we were not left alone and that society has done pretty much everything that it could to compensate for this. In terms of we do have society is easier on us psychologically. We show bias towards women. Studies have shown that we are easier on women. Women get lighter sentences than men for doing the same crime and stuff like that. And in general, we're just more likely to help women. One, and also we've compensated for it by actually creating a legal framework around the relationships between men and women where children were involved. Throughout history, we have created legal frameworks that make sure that men are not allowed to not be responsible, right? So they have done their part. They have taken half of the burden, and they have done it, I would say, relatively well. So yeah, I mean, that evens things out, in my opinion. I mean, a lot of people will even say that men took on more than their share because they've been disposable and blah blah blah, and you get into this. And I've explored stuff like that. I am more in the position where I don't think it makes sense to argue about who did more or less. I just think it doesn't make any sense. Um, I I think both historically have done good. Everybody did their part. You just keep doing your part, you know? Um, and I don't think it makes sense to argue that men have had it worse or women have had it worse or whoever. But I will give the feminists that in terms of nature, yes, we have been burdened with reproductive responsibility as women. And yes, you can say that that is unfair. I get it. But beyond that, in terms of society, society has corrected for that without feminism, before feminism, before the word feminism ever existed. Society saw that problem, corrected for that problem, created institutions, created religion, culture, created marriage, created so many things to make sure that things are equal. And I think you have to give society credit for that. I mean, it's never been that we've been left alone with that burden and that men have not done their part. They have. They have. Otherwise, society would not have survived. We couldn't survive without it. Okay, that's all.